Right, good evening, everyone, and welcome. Although it might not be evening where you are, my point still stands. Good evening. Welcome to another video. Today we are going to be doing our weekly team building video where we are going to talk about Wotv characters that have come around this week and what working, what is not working, what looks good, what looks mediocre. And before you click off on this video, you should know it's actually a really positive week. If whatever the tone was in my previous video of team building, this week it's definitely way more positive for a lot of reasons. I'm excited to talk about this. So let's go. All right, so starting off with my week. Obviously, the week for me has been pretty expensive because I have thrown a lot of resources towards my team. And while this team may look terrifying in terms of just the context of getting all three of these units in a short time span, the good news is that it's not just me who thinks this. This is probably one of the easier requirements to make a incredibly high-end team. Kind of. Now, if you want to talk about elemental masteries and holo-vision cards and getting all of those things maxed to bring even more out of this team, yeah, there's still stuff you can. And in terms of just elemental synergy, weapon synergy, there's a lot going on there. Generally this week, this seems to be one of the strongest teams out there. And you know, for good reason. I mean, essentially, you're looking at the three most powerful characters that the game has ever seen. Lord Mont, who's the strongest single target ever. Joom, who's amazing with AoEs, and Sephiroth with his curse status effect. Now, the only thing I'd like to point out about this is that from previous weeks where we looked at teams that have an insanely high holo vision card, this one's pretty simple. We're looking at Odin, we're looking at Golem, we're looking at some general speed-based cards, to which if you don't have the tactics-based one, well, you could probably just use the Black Rose Helena one to slightly less amazing extent. But for the most part, this team is at least a little bit cheaper on the VCs, where it's not cheaper necessarily on the characters. It's not an amazing thing to say out loud, but it is just looking to be one of the general strongest teams out there. Of course, if you want to compete with this at the highest ranks, you know, those holo vision cards, bonuses that are constantly active, masteries being higher for certain elements, all of that stuff is essentially, you know, more beneficial to making a team like this work, because there isn't too much cohesive gain from a lot of places here. And even if, I mean, Dark Titan is technically better in slot for you want Mont, that's something for globalers, but this is the party I've been going with lately. And I have to say, it's quite good. I'm really happy with it. Obviously, some people in my previous video were like, Umbra, why didn't you fight stronger teams? Well, my elemental mastery and my holo job beast is way worse than the people who are playing at top 1000 most of the time. So yeah, I mean, I still want points at the end of the day. I'm still trying to reincarnate Water Veritas. Give me a little bit of credit for what content I create. And besides, there's somebody out there we all know and love who does these videos and has done a really interesting job this week, which is, of course, Peachin. We love Peachin here. That is something that needs to be said in all of these building videos. So I want to show off a couple of things from Peachin. I'm going to actually up this to 60. So yeah, Peachin has been running basically the same team with a couple of other things. King Bradley's TMR is one of the things that he's running on that team instead, but almost the exact same VC. I obviously traded off one of the VCs on Sephiroth for a bonus for Arena, because of course that's a good way to just get ahead. But Peachin tested both of these teams this week, and yeah, early on, this team on the top, definitely looking the overall strongest, which you would kind of expect for the amount of cost of the characters and two of the strongest characters in the game getting map bonuses as well. Overall, Katana's the bottom team on the right, mid-tier Katana, or just like all Katana, all Katana, is looking okay. It's not looking amazing for the amount of cost that you essentially have here, that you're not going to be able to use this on really cost-limited style stuff. This doesn't overly excel from all the teams that I've seen it go up against, but it is generally pretty good. Now, whether that's good enough for you, I mean, if you like Dario and you like Sephiroth on Parade, then maybe this is the one. I haven't seen it with regular Sephi. I think he's just categorically generally worse than mini Sephi, as he is, Kadaj. But yeah, so for this video, we're not talking about this so much as we are just talking about the main team. So let's even just take a look. The teams that Peachin did go up against were all featured generally right here. And this is where the good news thing that I want to talk about this week before getting into the amount of teams that we do need to talk about. A key highlight for me this week was the top right team that you see right here, all Spears. Volk, new version of Old, and Wind Veritas is one of the standout teams because it is older characters, Wind Veritas being essentially a free-to-play character with how easy to reincarnate in general. Old being a character who's been around for a little bit and can be chosen off of a selector, and Volk, who is a lower cost character at 70 cost. This is a 270 team, and it actually not only competes, it does really well against Sephiroth teams, against all the teams, as Spear is kind of a bit of a weakness, especially when you're just jamming all three characters together without a tank, without too much protection against Spears. This team is actually still pretty good. So for people who are, feeling a little bit down and out because, didn't get Mont, didn't get June, didn't get Sephiroth, or maybe not going to get Sephiroth just because of resources, Spears looks pretty decent. Wind Veritas still set to get a piece of equipment later this year. Not too much later this year, in fact. And Volk being a generally lower cost, so events, I would say that this Spear team up here is one to watch. Ultros VC, I believe it's the Watched Plot. There are some Hollow VCs which make it a little bit difficult, but I see the Full Metal Alchemist one, the Bridal Alaya vision card, and I think the Children Hollow vision card in there. Well, there's one more. But if you were looking for a cheaper cost team, this one's actually performing really well against the highest tier of characters, so it definitely a standout and a bit of look. Talking about generally where teams are looking up against right now, for the most part, Cloud does seem inferior to Sephiroth, and that's not surprising. Sephiroth has just some nastier stuff in his kit, and generally stronger stuff in his kit. Cloud is still what I would consider to be a tier 1 character, but Sephiroth has very much earned his place in tier 0 this week, as now we get to talk about just Sephiroth. So, at the 9-minute mark, that's the Sephiroth, where the Sephiroth inflection is. So Sephiroth has fit his way into a cataclysmic amount of teams this week, what be they from all fire, including units that we will talk about in a second, to just being paired with Doom, to being Mont, to being paired with Vivi, as well as more. Really, there's no place that Sephiroth cannot actually be placed into in terms of teams, much like June, as a matter of fact, just because of the overall generality of his kit being so flexible, of being so good at shutting down other teams because of the curse status effect. That really is what's paving the way for Sephiroth to be strong. And yes, curse will eventually wane a little bit, but it's still generally going to be strong because, I mean, there's very unlikely going to be immunity equipment, because there hasn't essentially been immunity equipment for most stuff for a good portion of its life, and Sephiroth is going to be like that. But yeah, this can cancel out re-raise, this can cancel out all types of healing, and that is incredibly strong as with how many characters depend on those types of healing. A Mont like this versus another Mont, one without that healing effect that comes when he loses X amount of HP, is huge, and especially with Monts everywhere just using the blood sword. So yeah, right there you can just see how ineffective it is with how physical the meta actually is based right now. Yeah, it's also more than a little good. You can potentially even run Helena and Bibi with Sephiroth, because those status effects that those two mages can cast in combination with canceling out healing is really good. Since all of those effects are triggered on massive AoEs, guess what? Sephiroth can cancel out some of those types of resistances that made those characters weaker. So yeah, once again, he's finding places where he's generally good. And I don't even think we've scratched the surface of the number of places that Sephiroth is good. And it hasn't, this is another key point, hasn't depreciated you are Mont. It hasn't depreciated you are June. Both of those characters here that you see in this video are insanely good and still tier 0. We have 3 tier 0 characters that are pushing down a lot of other characters now. But yeah, Sephiroth generally has ended up being quite strong, very, 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 very good on multiple teams, and we are seeing him everywhere on. He's literally starting to become a bit of a plague, but most people have him. Probably not too concerning because everyone's just going to be using him. Just curses everything. But yeah, after this match right here, we'll shift over to another one and talk about it. But here, again, curse status effect triggering on some characters. As you can see, it can miss. Not super well, but it can miss. And you can see also the amount DPS. Wind Veritas is really good for being a counter to UR Mont still, which he always kind of was. But for the last few weeks, with the way that team competition has been, Wind Veritas has kind of suffered a little bit and not been generally good enough to get there. But with a team like this, where it's just so offensive, you actually have a little bit more space. Not too terribly much, as we're about to see here. So Volk's re-raise, not even working at times for him. But yeah, you can see the DPS that is capable of output. I silenced him and he still keeps fighting. But yeah, Spear, as you can see, as I was talking about earlier, is quite still a force to be reckoned with. Pretty strong. Not strong enough against this team, but pretty strong. So yeah, it goes on a bunch of other matches, but now let's switch over and talk about Mono Fire. Mono Fire has been a another interesting standout this week. I haven't just been watching Peachin, I've been watching a lot of other Sephiroth videos that are out there, since so many people are putting the effort in to get him, raise him, excuse me, quickly, and use him right away. And Sephiroth has been very, very useful. Mono Fire with Volk. Volk is still a really, really good tank, and Soul as well. This team generally still loses to water, as it should, but it is very, very, very strong. Here, seeing a purely great sword team going up against it, and you can see, pretty dominating, even with June in that party. So interestingly, for as much damage as UR Mont did to the JP meta, Sephiroth has been kind of a healing factor, allowing some mages to even find new homes where they can be quite successful and very good. But yeah, Joom is still scary. And to this point, it's not really the end of the conversation. We'll go back and talk about this. But jumping ahead a little bit. Looking here, lots of different greatsword teams, mostly all losing to fire. And then in the second half of this video is looking at essentially spears. But here you can see Sephiroth with Vivi and Helena, of all things, against Mono Fire, and just skipping ahead to the end result. And there you go. A 2 mage with Sephiroth party ends up being actually quite strong and very, very scary. Later in the video, we also see just going up against, we believe, yeah, checking out all of these different teams where Sephiroth has found different places against Evasion Light, all kinds of stuff that has been tested. There's just way too much. If there was a big takeaway from this week, it's that the meta on JP feels anywhere near from solved, and Sephiroth has actually been an amazing breath of fresh air, at least, as you can essentially make a team like this and throw Sephiroth. You can throw him with different spears. Obviously, wind spear is pretty good since fire and wind have some crossover with multi-element. These you can throw him in with Joom, as a matter of fact, making a kind of water-based and fire-based party, something like this, with a third character such as a tank, such as Summer Classy, who's particularly good against physical right now. That's another option. There is so many teams that have come out this week that I don't feel like there is too terribly much definitive that I can say in terms of team building. There's just so much happening where there's even enough room with the variety out there that some older stuff can kind of shine too. And that's a generally positive thing. We are seeing a lot of movement. I would say, if I had to, from the data that I have seen, that all three characters together still generally seems like the best team. But Water Veritas is doing quite well with Spring Joom. UR Mont is just doing general all really, really well. I wouldn't say that there's a definitive answer here about what teams you can potentially make, but there's also just too much to say about all the different teams that I've seen this week that are winning matches against other very, very strong. Where, like, Evie and Helena are back in the Spear team are back in the conversation. Summer Glassy and Water Veritas are in the conversation. Mono Fire is in the conversation. And yeah, that is generally good, because it feels like where the last few weeks we've been narrowing. Now it's the Wild West in terms of what teams are generally good, and it feels like there's a lot of struggle, which is, again, really positive in terms of chance, which is what these videos are. So anyway, hopefully this video has been enlightening to you. Of course, like with talking about all the different teams out there, there's just too much to do in even one video, and it's a little too much to even process. So maybe if there's a generalization in the comments below about what teams you'd like me to talk about further, if there's a specific team that's quite interesting to a number of people or people who are interested, I will try and make a video about them. But leave your comments below which you think is interesting, and I will try and do more in the near future. Thanks so much for watching. See you later.